It is a lot about reframing, isn't it? It's like
Yeah.
you can say, okay, I was victimized,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
and yet not be stuck being a victim, because that's
Right.
Mhm.
so disempowering.
Yep.
It's so disempowering. And you see, you know, there Richard Rohr is, what is he? He's like picture. That's why I'm asking these questions. Let's see. Okay. So here we go. Okay.
Welcome to the Matt and Monica podcast, where we have Sara Correll, she is actually the host of another podcast, and that's called The Power of Your Story. And she interviews veterans all over the country, probably outside of the country, I imagine, as well. I'm just curious, Sara, how many podcasts have you recorded with different veterans and first responders, correct?
Yes. I think we are probably over 400 now.
Wow.
It's amazing.
Yeah. Those are
Absolutely.
recorded. And then many that we don't record. You know,
Yeah.
whatever is helpful for the veteran or first responder, if they're ready to share
Right.
the story, or if they just need, need people to listen. And
Yeah.
Mhm.
so, yeah, it's
So
been a lot.
how did this journey start for you? Tell us a little bit about you and how you got down or went down this path, rather.
So in 2003, I lost my dad to suicide. And, you know, it's anybody who survived a suicide of a close loved one. It's just life-changing. It's different than really rough grief. It's very complicated. So that just that really changed my trajectory. It just changed who I am. And there's a lot to kind of work through. At the time, I had 3 little boys, and I had a 4th one coming that year. And, you know, I mean, honestly, by the grace of God, I did my life. I just was the best mom that I knew how. I wanted them to have a great childhood. I have just a lot of good friends. We had a lot of kids over all the time. So I just, you know, it was just hard though at night. I think that's when I would start feeling depressed. And
Do you have any siblings?
what's that?
Do you have any siblings of your own?
I have a brother.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But you know, it is amazing. It's amazing when something really turns your life upside down, inside out. It's such an opportunity to be the best version of yourself. I think that's part of the plan. I really do. I could not imagine being in a better place right now. So all that to say is I wanted to use that when my kids got older. I wanted to use that experience to help other people, you know, who were suffering in silence.
Sounds
And
familiar.
Yeah.
I ended up going back to school, and I just happened to be, I tell you, this is divine orchestration. It's so strange. I'm trying to record myself over here, and it's getting really wonky. So,
You don't have to hold the other shot. If you're holding it the whole time, I wouldn't even worry about it.
oh, okay. Can I turn it off?
Oh, yeah. No, I wouldn't want you to. No, I just meant
We
like
don't
set
want you
it down.
uncomfortable. Yeah.
Okay. So anyway, I think what was so life-changing about this, it was just a moment where it could have been this fork in the road that I sat in a different chair for this class. And I ended up sitting right next to a veteran. And one time we just had this conversation. I got very curious about him and just said, you know, is there any way, I don't really know a lot about veterans. Is there any way that you could share your story with me? And I mean, there's so many things that happened from that one point where he was willing to sit down with me and share his story. And I felt just so much compassion. Like I think the biggest thing for me as a civilian is I thought, how come we're not part of this? How come we are sending these kids off to be trained for war, and we are not taking care of them in the back end? How come we don't understand the cost of war? Why don't we understand what families are going through when they lose their loved ones? Everything just seemed so wrong in that way. How are we not part of this? So, and then that just opened. I mean, I could tell you more details of kind of how things happen, but I think it just opened the door then to first responders. And then it's this world of protectors with Gold Star families where we're meeting in groups every week. That's where we're at now. And then,
I just wanted to touch upon something because you talked about reaching out to this person and asking him about his story, and I think that's something that I think more people should be more comfortable with, because sometimes people really would love somebody to talk to, but not everybody has that. And vulnerability, I realized, it's very similar, different specific reasons, but it sounds like adversity was the reason why you went down this path, and us as well. And it's so common amongst just about everybody we've talked to. It's like everybody that is trying their hardest to just, I guess, give back and help other individuals, whether it's with soldier suicide or suicide in general, mental health and the addiction and whatnot.
I feel like sometimes people that are going through a hard time or have already gone through a hard time, like veterans, and they have PTSD and whatnot, they want to talk. They don't know how to ask for help. So if someone reaches out like you did and you were interested in getting to know his story, maybe that opened up some doors where he was like, oh, someone actually cares and wants to hear what I went through and maybe help, and I think that people need to know that it's okay to, ask about people's stories. And if they don't want to talk, they don't have to, but that might open up communication for them.
Yeah. Yeah. I think so too. I think it gives people an opportunity to be able to connect. And I think, the suffering in silence, the grief in transition, the grief in maybe losing battle buddies, just so much that's so different than civilian life, not having their team, not having their tribe.
Yeah.
Never doing anything alone in the military, then all of a sudden you're transitioning alone. I mean, there's just, there's so many things, that training is gold for civilian life. And yet we're not protecting that. We're not protecting, that transition time where we could really help integrate them and be, great leaders in the way that they know how. There's just so many things. There's so many reasons why I have such a passion and a vision for this arena.
Yeah. I know that when you specifically with the transitionary period, it's that applies, I think, to everybody, especially the special operators that were, they're gung ho, and that is their life. And when you go from having so much purpose and then having, your days and your weeks just laid out of you constantly have things to do, then all of a sudden you hit your, say, 20-year mark and you retire and you get out and it's like, what do I do now?
And a lot of them come home to used to having, a wife or a husband and kids there. And a lot of times they come home and that relationship or that family is not there anymore. So it's like they're away from their team in the military. They come home expecting to have their family there. And that's not always the case. So that's like even deeper of being with hundreds of your comrades and then coming home thinking you have your, family team, and that's not there. So that makes it like, 10 times harder. So that's just it's just like you said, there's so much in, the transitioning. That's just one little piece of coming home and maybe your family's not there because of whatever reasons, and I couldn't imagine that.
And I hear this a lot, that's usually the last straw is, when the relationship disintegrates, that's when they're really vulnerable.
Right.
And I would love to see those who protect us be set up so well for transition. Some of these guys, the guy that I met was young. He was like, I think 39 at the time. And, my civilian self, before hearing the story, I'm like, oh, that's cool. You're 39, you get to retire. And I had no idea what he went through. I had some ideas that he was specially trained from a school project, but no clue. And then that's when the curiosity, again, I have 4 sons, and imagining them signing on that line, being set up the way that I was starting to see the pieces come together, I just thought that's just not okay. It's not okay.
I think one of the most valuable tools that I think a lot of these people need is they just like investing in themselves, self-improvement, rather than going down the road of when they're feeling lonely or hopeless. A lot of people go down, either drinking or drugs, and it's very, very easy to go down those paths. And which is why I've always, said, you try not to judge an addict. I think I told you when we talked on the phone briefly, I lost my sister in 2020 to a battle with drugs, and it's so easy to be on the outside looking in and wonder why people make these crazy decisions, and even suicide. I actually had somebody that was a special operator that told me something. I never changed my perspective on suicide, and he said, a lot of people make that decision because of the pain and suffering that they feel as if they can't handle.
Yeah.
And what they really need to realize is when they make that decision, you're not getting rid of that pain and suffering. You're handing it to those people that you love dearly. So
you're like multiplying it.
Yeah. And I think that's so important. It was really important for me to hear, when, perspective is everything, as we all know.
Yeah. That's a fresh loss for you.
Yeah.
That's not a long time, 5 years,
Mhm.
4.5, whatever.
Yeah.
Very sorry about that, by the way. And I know how life-changing that is. I think too, especially with special operators, so many can have lesions in their brains from the blasts. I think
Right.
they're doing more now to protect them,
Mhm.
fully, prayerfully, but to also have to deal with lesions in your brain, little holes, pinholes in your brain.
Mhm.
Sometimes seeing the scans can relieve some shame if they see, okay, there's actually a physical wound there, like a physical wound, and you break your leg.
Yeah.
Right.
But that can really impact your emotions, and
Mhm.
especially if somebody doesn't really understand what's going on.
Right.
Yeah.
So, it really is so important to get information and connect to really understand what is happening to us if we're struggling with trauma, post-traumatic stress, or traumatic brain injury, or understanding that what they may be feeling is extreme grief. They just lost their
Yeah.
family. And when they went
Right.
on and the machine keeps going, and they're
Yeah.
like, okay, don't quite understand the civilian life and how
Mhm.
civilians deal with, how they work, at the job. That can be very tough. So,
Right.
yeah, a lot of new things alone.
And I've always said, I believe that, PTSD is generally siloed to while you're away and deployed, whereas I can't imagine how much PTSD is, occurring specifically from what happens while you're gone and what happens at home. Like going through
Right.
spousal issues. I think the divorce rate for special operators is like 70 or 80% or something crazy like that.
That's
And
so sad.
it's like,
Oh.
what does that do to you when you're gone and
Mhm.
something happens? Which again, that's another situation where it's easy to be on the outside looking in and judging. I don't think many people go into a deployment and they think, oh, we're not going to be able to do this. It's life, and
Yeah.
there's got to be a lot of advocacy for that when they come home, taking care of these vets, like you have mentioned. And
I
I
think,
think we need to.
go
Oh,
ahead.
sorry. I was just gonna say, I feel like we all need to treat them more like human beings and not numbers, not just like let's go to the VA and get a number and sit in the waiting room and wait, And I don't know I don't have the answer of how to fix that, but I know they needed to be treated more like human beings that are going through a hard time rather than, people at the VA, like his experience, people at the window might just be like, all right, what's your name? All right, go sit down. It's like maybe talk to them for a couple seconds and see if, hey, are you okay right now? Is it an emergency? You need to talk to someone now, not just, it's like, getting a number when you're at the deli at the supermarket. Take a number and go sit.
Yeah.
And I just wish it was better, easier for them. And I feel like if it was a nicer experience, then maybe more veterans maybe would go to the VA.
just add context to what she's talking about is I don't remember when we spoke because it's been a couple months, but I had an experience. I talked about it. I think it was one of my first ever YouTube videos I've ever uploaded. It was from September of 23, and just when I checked myself into a walk-in VA clinic, in which that was not easy. It was probably easier to walk in that clinic though than it was to actually post a video of me talking about it. Like I was so nervous, but I'm like, man, if it helped one guy out there, it's
Mm,
worth it. But
yeah.
I had a good experience going into the VA, but the employee that worked there, she just, well, it was like she was working at the DMV, and I didn't look good, but it was a pretty cool experience. Just a VA police officer that was working there sat down next to me, and we became friends, and I spilled my heart out to this guy that didn't know me. And it's, I think it's part of the reason why we got into this podcasting thing. I just like just listening to somebody, that's what he did for me, is all he did was listen, and he acted like he cared. I mean, he would interrupt me. And I imagine in your journey, 400 episodes, and I don't know what percentage of those were first responders opposed to military. But I can't imagine how much value you've gained or how much purpose you've gained doing this. It's a beautiful thing.
Yep.
It is just, even circling back really quickly to what Monica said too, and you about the experience. If we just see, people have gone to battle for us. Mm-hmm. They have deployed. They have been a first responder every day, seeing people on their worst day. The common sense human thing to do is treat them with compassion, with no judgment, right? It's to be there to help. Yeah. Like if we lock into that, it's what can I do to support you, to support those who have protected us in whatever fashion. And it hurts me always to hear that about the VA, about people who are just bored in their job and have no clue what's in front of them, who is in front of them. But I think that is the power of more and more civilians hearing these stories. That's one of the reasons why I wanted to have the Wounds to Wisdom book, is like, hear all of our protectors, hear their stories. This is what they are doing. And I have a son now who's serving. So I'm, after I got into this, he came back, third son. He says, yeah, by the way, I'm going to join the military. I'm like, what? I'm going to, and I thought, well, why should it be somebody else's son, Yeah. But it took me a minute. I wasn't awesome at the first, response, but I got there, and I'm proud of him, very proud of him. But yeah, I think we really should be in this together.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think with law enforcement, because I don't know if I told you, I worked a couple of years for a local village police department, and I got a lot of friends and family that are in law enforcement. And when you hear PTSD, most people, at least me personally, I feel like most people think that they think of military. They think of people that have been to war and deployed and whatnot, and not taking that away from that. But that PTSD has gotten a pretty good spotlight on it, I think, in the last few years. I feel like the advocacy for that it's ramped up, which is good. And just the stigma around law enforcement I think it's a lot better than what the media is portraying. I think there's a lot more people that think very highly and support law enforcement, support good law enforcement. And people don't realize what law enforcement go through, like going through to these domestics that are horrible situations. And, they go showing up to a domestic. I remember this like it was yesterday, when you get a really bad domestic and there's kids in a really unsafe environment, and there's nothing you can do. All you can do is you write up a domestic incident report, and you're leaving that situation as it was, when it's not good. And situations like that, or we get a fatal motor vehicle accident with severe injury or personal injuries, and it's like you said, you're seeing a lot of these people on their absolute worst days of their lives. Yeah. And then you just got to go home, take off your uniform, go to sleep, and act like it was just another regular day. I think if you were to look at the numbers, I bet law enforcement, and not even just law enforcement, firefighters too, volunteer firefighters, they're seeing things on a very frequent basis. And, there's a lot of soldiers that, they never deploy, or even if they do deploy, they may not see combat. And, again, not taking anything away from those individuals by any means, but law enforcement and first responders as a whole, I think the mental health aspect of that I think it's being worked on as well. We had a volunteer fire chief actually on our podcast a few months ago, and he talked about some things that they have in place, and it's a beautiful thing.
That's good. Talked about awareness.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. There's a lot that he talked about that, I didn't know a lot of the stuff that he told us. And I think, like you said, awareness, we need to get it out there. We need to show the world like what is actually going on. And, us, normal people living our days, day by day. And it's not even like me working at an elementary school is not the same as law enforcement. I go to school, come home, try to give those kids love because, a lot of them need it. But the law enforcement definitely sees other things that, we take for granted that they're out there doing and dealing with. And they do that every day.
Yeah. Isn't that funny? We get in our own worlds. I was
Mhm.
fully the same way. We're just
Yeah.
trying to live
Right.
the best life we can for our families. And
Yeah.
I think that's what really shook me too, is same thing. I thought, gosh, shouldn't I know about this?
Right.
I
Yeah.
know about how hard it is, even if it's not combat veterans. Like I live in San Diego. So we have a very large off-base housing
Mm-hmm.
community. And shouldn't I have known that a lot of these kids have their parents deploying all the time and they're moving, and it just so many things woke me up. And like you said too, just with law enforcement and firefighters, I hear stories all the time of, things that maybe I have gone through maybe twice in my life. They see, like you said, every day. How can a human being not be impacted by that?
Right.
So again, I think, what they say is we heal in community. I was always taught we heal in community, but I think it's healthy community.
Mm.
Be done in by unhealthy community, because I hear verbal stories about that too, and betrayal. But healing and healthy community where you have the freedom to share resources, where you can share modalities that have really helped a person, there's no stigma, there's no judgment, saying, hey, EMDR really helped me. Or some people are doing the psychedelic therapy, which, it took me a while to kind of understand that whole thing, kind of made me nervous, but it's really helping people's brains heal.
Yeah.
And
The track record is incredible.
they're getting a reset, right? They're
Yeah.
getting a new lease in life. So, but I would not have known about this stuff had I not been in these groups and heard about it and
Right.
seen the differences. And that, I have seen over the last 5 years, just through the camaraderie in sharing stories or being together, I have seen amazing things where people have gone on and gone back to school, got married, moved, just really exciting.
Living their life.
They're
like a
living.
fulfilled
Yeah,
life with
it's awesome.
purpose.
Yeah.
It's amazing what you can do when you realize you can control. If you put effort into those things you can control in your life, because there's going to be circumstances outside of your control that could tear you apart or break you. Like my sister, there's nothing I could do about that. I tried everything I could. But when you realize that you can't dwell on those things outside of your control anymore, and you start working on your physical fitness, for example, that's been one of the pinnacles of the last couple of years. I say spirituality. I'm not one to push faith upon anybody, but man, boy, did it help my family.
Worked.
We've been going to church now for a little over a year, and that's changed so many aspects. Just being able to take your anxieties and your worry, be like, you know what? I really believe this is in the plan.
Right.
But also allowing yourself to use what you're going through as stepping stones. And like we say, leveling up, because you can make a choice to go down that dark path, like victimize yourself and be like, I can't handle this, and not learn anything. With everything, everything happens for a reason type of thing. You also have free will. And I do think that you can kind of change some things depending on the decisions that you make with your experiences in your life. I think we all can do that. And I know sometimes people are like, no, I'm just how I am. Like, oh, I'm just a smoker, or I'm just a drinker. Like, I mean, you weren't born a smoker or a drinker. So are you really? I don't know. I just think people can think more positive, and if they want to be a certain way, I think everyone wants to be a good person and a healthy person. And they just need that guidance and that awareness that there's so much help out there. They just need to know how to get it.
It is a lot about reframing, isn't it? It's like you can say, okay, I was victimized. And yet not be stuck being a victim, because that's so disempowering.
Yep.
It's so disempowering. And you see, there Richard Rohr is, what is he? He's like a Catholic monk, or I can't remember. He's a Catholic priest. And, he always says that if we do not deal with our trauma, we are bound to transmit it.
Okay.
And I
Yeah.
always think about that. Like, if we stay stuck in our being victimized and become that victim, we end up transmitting that trauma. You can see it in the news today all the time, and things happening out there, all that anger and that separation and that. But when it can be reframed and say, you know what? Yes, I was victimized, and really try to learn how to reframe that experience so that you can start building that life where you're actually more empowered than when you went through whatever you went through. Right? There's so many opportunities. And yes, it's messy. It's totally messy. That's why we don't want to, shame and judge and all that sort of thing. But if we can just understand, it's messy. It takes a lot of courage to heal. It's a new mission. And the first responders and veterans have the courage. They
Absolutely. And it takes time. People want the instant fix, like that instant, I just want to be better tomorrow. But it takes so much time. And it's okay. It's supposed to take time.
We talk about that a lot because I think the alternative modalities in general, that's something that is getting a lot of light shed on over the past few years, because all of a sudden it's not taboo to talk about psychedelics. But it's like, I think a lot of that was being pushed off for so long because there's a lot more money in sick care than there is health care, I like to say, because I worked in healthcare for 4 years. And when it comes to the antidepressants and stuff, and I'm not saying they aren't for anybody. Maybe they are, but in my experience and the people I've talked to, I'm finding this really common theme that there's a lot of people that are adamantly against, or they've had horrible experiences with them just as well, Monica included.
I with my past, when I got out of my situation, I had the racing thoughts, the depression, and all that kind of stuff. So my doctor put me on, actually I think it was Paxil first, and in a week I was just like lost weight, felt sick, so they put me on Cymbalta. And I was on Cymbalta for years. I couldn't even remember how long, and I was still on it when we met. And I acted so like a zombie. Like my emotions weren't there when they should have been at the times where they needed to be there.
I'll say she acted normal until like there was moments where I'm like, you should have more of a reaction than how you're reacting.
Right.
Like with just certain various things
but then I'm not against medication. I think some people do need it, but I think people also abuse it. And it's like a scapegoat to not work on yourself, because I know that's very hard too. It takes, time and energy and effort to better yourself. But I eventually weaned myself off, and I'm so thankful because you take it every day. And if I didn't take it for one day, my old boss would be like, I could totally tell that you didn't take it for like probably less than 24 hours. And that's the effects that it had on me. Yeah. And I needed it. In the meantime, when I had to calm myself down and understand, I went to therapy and all that kind of stuff. And learned, I just think, I've always been religious and spiritual since I was younger, and that really helped me. And I think that could help a lot of people. But just being grateful and meeting someone that supports me and loves me, which I've never had anything like this before, I think definitely helped me. So that was a plus. But I just feel better without it. If I didn't take it, I would feel sick, and that's a drug. To me, was poisoning my body. I feel like my mind, I couldn't get in touch or in tune with myself.
I've heard that from people. Like they kind of felt, I've never personally been on any SSRIs or anything like that. But I've heard that some people have felt like they were just kind of a shell of a person.
Right.
I've heard that. And, I think a lot of veterans felt like, told me they were like they had a mini suitcase full of pharmaceuticals, and then they weaned themselves off too, or they did it with support, with some person somewhere. Yeah.
Yep.
That's I would never want to say that's a complicated area. That's not my lane.
Right.
But I know that some people have said that it can help at the beginning.
Exactly.
Um,
Yep.
yeah. Yeah.
You know, I wanted to say with 400 plus episodes and recordings, I'm noticing we're like 37, 38
Yeah.
episodes. And it's like, I gain so much from having conversations with people. And I think that's what I realize that's my thing. I don't know. I get so much purpose out of just doing this, just sitting down, listening to somebody and running my mouth as well. But, do you ever feel like, man, like I feel like I absorb a little bit of all these individuals that I'm talking to, and I just little pieces, and just hearing the way they look at things and sharing their perspective with me. I find it so valuable.
Yeah, me too. Me too. You see, it's incredible because I think with over the last 5 years, you see some very clear common themes,
Yeah.
which are really important. And then you also hear all these narratives that are so powerful, great perspectives and interesting modalities that people can add in their toolbox. Ideas of even how people can go forward using their specific talents and their passions. And it's really exciting to kind of see people's journeys and hear them share what it's been like.
Yeah. Right. I can't imagine how many people that you've helped letting them have a voice. And that makes my heart so happy because that we're trying to let people have voices and tell their stories. And I hope the people that you've had on your show know that they are helping a lot of people, even if they don't get that feedback. There's people out there that are listening that can connect with them and they don't feel alone. And I think that's very powerful.
That's
cute. I wanted to touch upon something real quick, Sarah. Have you ever gotten into like guided breath work or anything like that, or meditation?
Not really, but I think it's a great thing. I mean, there's data. I just haven't done, spiritually, I try to listen to God. I'll sit there and be real quiet. I've tried them. Like, John McCaskill he's the Navy SEAL that has his podcast, and I've been on there and I follow, his meditation, when he does that at the beginning, and it's awesome. I just don't do it, but I know it's helpful.
There's September 23 is that same time I was trying to reinvest, and I listened to a podcaster, Eddie Pirino, talk about guided breath work, and he said it was the most life-changing thing he's experienced. And so I'm, I have an Oculus, like a VR headset that you wear, and I'm like, I have an app on there that's called Trip, and I'm like, I think that's meditation. So I actually tried it out, and like guided breath work. So you do breathing exercises, and of course you're fully immersed in this environment with really cool sounds and stuff. And I was shocked with how much of a positive impact that had on my psyche. Like there were nights where I had broken nights where I wasn't doing well. Was going through very real concerns, really real anxieties that were completely, just about people outside of my control. And I realized the power just clearing your mind and just quieting your mind and the power of your breath. That's something I try to, if I heard it years ago, I would want to hear that and have it make an impact on me. So I tried it because I wish I started doing that when I was younger.
Yeah.
But
the box I was just and the that sort of thing. Yeah. I wish that I had known all that when I felt more anxious, like with my dad. Like if I had known that at night, because I think that alpha and beta waves come up, and at night, that's why we can feel more depressed when things happen. And I think that would have been really nice to know at that time. I'm not really struggling right now, so I don't feel as motivated to like that kind of practice, but I hear it's fantastic. Yeah.
I notice it even be just about as beneficial as when I'm like motivated and on just things are going really good, which we've had. I better knock on wood. It's been like 3 or 4 weeks of peace, and just things are just going so good for us right now. So
and I feel like it's important to do it too. It's kind of like when I'm praying, I don't want to just ask for things when things are going good. You got to be thankful for things too. So it's kind of like, you might as well meditate when things are going good too, and just keep your mind clear.
That's probably one of the most valuable things I picked up is just being grateful, because, going when you're broken and you hopefully can just be a better person because of whatever you went through. So that way, at least whatever you went through, it's not like it's went to waste.
Right.
And, you know, like for my sister's a great example. You know, when she passed away, I looked at life differently. And then, you know, things I've been through over the past couple of years, I really look at life differently, because when you realize that life can, like, the carpet can be pulled out from underneath you anytime.
Yeah.
It's so important. If you constantly live your life like that is a realistic possibility with anything, you see things and you do things that are differently. You appreciate things, you hear birds, and just, I don't know. It's a beautiful thing. And I think that's one thing that I believe the more difficult thing you go through, it more powerful, and the more it can benefit you in your life, as long as you put effort into holding that perspective. You may have to give yourself time to grieve or whatever you've been through, but
you got to go through it.
Yeah.
I totally agree. Gosh, even the gratitude, I feel like that was one of the biggest life changers for me.
Yeah.
You know, some really tough times when I got anchored into, okay, what do I have right now? And being so thankful for everything. We talk about that a lot on our groups.
Yeah.
Good.
The power of gratitude, it rewires us.
Yeah.
I need to join one of those. I really want to check it out. And I mean to.
That'd be awesome.
Great.
I apologize. Like, it's like, yeah, I'm really busy, but I'm not that busy to the point I can't. I need to take time out of my day and do that.
Right.
Because I think it could benefit me. And I find so much value, and sometimes I feel like I try too hard, but sometimes I find so much value in just talking to somebody and just, I don't know. I've had so many experiences, not only just podcasting, but even friends and family, just, you know, going that next level of, you know, vulnerability, you know, opens a lot of doors with people. And
well, I was just thinking about veterans that have learned to deal with their past and deal with their, you know, issues of things that they've seen, PTSD and stuff. When they can grow from that and they're in a good headspace and whatnot, and when they can help another fellow veteran that is going through hard times and make that like a cycle, I can't just imagine, you know, the growth of mental health for veterans. If they really knew the impact that they would have, you know, on each other, if they all could help each other heal.
Yeah.
Because they're all connected.
Yeah, definitely.
It takes strength to be able to talk sometimes, though. And it's not always easy for a lot of people, especially when you're, you know, tough guy in military or law enforcement. And
that's why I feel like we need to break that.
Yes.
You know, it's right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Man, Sarah, where can people, I want you to self-promote. I mean, everything you're doing, I see you sharing stuff on LinkedIn all the time. I try to follow what you're doing, and I love it. It's inspired me to, you know, want to help people even more. Where can people, you know, self-promote by all means? Your book, your website, anything.
Where people can find you.
Yes. No problem. I appreciate it. Yeah.
I love it. Amazing.
Well, I appreciate it, Sarah.
Thank you so much.
I know you understand this all too well, but we just hit the 7 o'clock mark. And now we have a 7 o'clock and we have an 8 o'clock. So I appreciate your time, because I know you're incredibly busy as well. And yeah, maybe someday we could do something in person when we're on the West Coast.
That'd be amazing. I would love that.
So we intend on that.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. You have a great night.
Have a great night.
Keep doing what you're doing.